Sales is about helping people get results. It's about helping your customers win. It's about developing relationships for a customer. And if you do that properly, then you win.
Sometimes we sense that this transaction will serve our bank balance, but it might not serve the person who's buying from us. Traditional sales would have you take that sale anyway. Heart-centered sales would have you say, no, thank you, I'm going to do the right thing because there will be somebody else along in a minute.
Welcome to the 4 a.m. Report. Let's face it, we all have to market. Large or little, it's harder than ever to stand out in a cluttered space of one-size-fits-all and copycat marketing moves. Welcome to the 4 a.m. Report, a micro-podcast that brings you valuable conversations with people on the marketing dilemmas keeping them up at night. Here are your hosts, contrarian marketers and creative clutter cutters, Susan Diaz and Will Lamont.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 4 a.m. Report. We know we have a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, small business owners out there doing great, running their business, doing what they should be doing. One thing, though, a lot of us, and me included, one of our weak points is sales, that idea of selling what we have to offer, business development. It just, a mindset just descends upon me. So, Susan, we decided we wanted to invite someone on who talks about doing sales in a different way. And I'm very excited to learn from her. So why don't you go ahead and introduce her?
We're speaking with Catherine Watkin, founder of Selling from the Heart and the UK's leading expert in heart-centered sales. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting.
Tell us what heart-centered sales is versus the traditional way of selling. Set this up for us.
Yeah. So for me, I find, because I work mainly with people who have gone into business because they want to make a difference to others through their work, or they're doing their business because they're passionate about whatever it is they do. And this particular group of people tend to not be, they want a good income, but it's not all about the money at all costs. So they often struggle with the more traditional approaches to sales. And traditional sales seems to sort of rest on this foundation that says sales is all about making the potential client say yes. It's all geared towards getting that yes. And if that means using psychological techniques or NLP-based techniques or even hypnotic techniques, if somebody's really skilled, that's what they will do in order to get the yes. And for me, heart-centered sales is much more about coming from a place that says, I have something of value here that's going to make a true difference to you. Let's have a conversation and let's figure out between us whether this is going to be right for you or not. Now, it's not about being wishy-washy or fluffy. Mm-hmm. It's still about, if you recognize that person will benefit from working with you, it's still about making really clearly articulating the difference you make and making a really clear recommendation, and even being a bit persuasive if you need to be to get them to go ahead. But it's not about, I'm going to get you to say yes at all costs. I'm here today because it suits my agenda. I'm going to close the sale. I'm going to hit my sales targets. It's a much more collaborative process. And it is a process that if the salesperson is truly heart-centered, they may actually decide not to invite the client to work with them because it just doesn't feel like a good fit, or they sense that it's not. Sometimes we sense that this transaction will serve our bank balance, but it might not serve the person who's buying from us. Traditional sales would have you take that sale anyway. Heart-centered sales would have you say, no, thank you, I'm going to do the right thing because there will be somebody else along in a minute. The heart-centered doesn't take away from the fact that it might also be a numbers game to a certain extent. But,
nice.
One of the things you've hinted at there is just the language that often gets used in sales. You refer to people, traditional sales language refers to people as leads and prospects. And it's about actually, no, these are human beings who may or may not potentially buy from me. And so depending on the nature of somebody's business, somebody might well be generating their potential clients through one-to-one activity. They may be building connections on LinkedIn, having referral introductions. Maybe even some people are still old-fashioned enough that they pick up the phone and make calls to people. That was my sales background. That's a lot less common these days that people are doing it that way. Or you might be selling much more in the way that I do in my business, because I actually, although I teach one-to-one sales and that's my core program, ironically, my own business has grown to the point where I don't do much one-to-one sales myself anymore. I'm running online courses and memberships. So I actually enroll my clients more in a one-to-many way. And when I'm selling, instead of selling through a one-to-one sales conversation, I'm actually selling through a webinar and through a sales page and through an email sequence. But even then, you can still bring the same principles in, which is about, really understanding the client that you're speaking to them in a respectful way. One of the things that I always talk about in sales is the importance of allowing your client to say no. And I always say that your client will only say yes to buying from you when they first feel completely safe that it's okay to say no.
One thing I struggle with, Catherine, if say I'm pitching an idea for new business to someone, I always struggle with including lines like, feel free to say no, or no strings attached. And I always wonder if that's setting me up for failure, or if that is actually just being, because it's literally what I mean, but I feel it's not very salesy of me and a little unproductive. So I'm wondering what you think about language like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a fan of no strings attached, because every time, as soon as I hear the phrase no strings attached, I go, okay, right, there's some strings.
Right.
There's a string.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be not obvious about my strings. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's just, it's the intention behind it, but then it's about the language that you choose to use. So if I'm wanting to, let's say that I've invited somebody into, one of the things I teach a lot is offering a high value free session. It's not the only way of doing sales. You can bring people straight into straight sales conversations as well. But for business owners, particularly in the early stages, they just want to be generating as many conversations as possible. So I encourage them to design a high value free session where the feeling behind it is of generosity. I'm happy to do this free session with you, and I'm happy to help you get clarity on this one thing. And then the exchange is like, I'm going to give you something of value, and but you still use that conversation as a sales conversation. You transition it into that sales conversation. And so at the beginning of that call, you might say something like, if by the end of this call today, I really feel that you'd benefit from doing further work with me, I will invite you to take that next step, or I will make a recommendation for working with me. And if it's not right for you, that's fine. There's no obligation, but just to let you know that will be happening.
It makes a lot of sense to me, because really, what you were just saying was what my inner saboteur says when it comes to it. It's like, now I'm going to, and I'm being too sales. Like, you just totally were exactly what's in my head. So I appreciate everything you're saying there. One of the things too, I would think that would come with this way of selling is, because you're offering up information and you're making it clear that you want to be of benefit above and beyond just making money. Even if they say no, I would think this would set you up for 6 months down the road when maybe there's a project that's more fitting for you, or that person could become almost an advocate, and you'll never know it. That person could actually recommend you and your services to a few other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is where I'm not a fan of a lot of what I call the more aggressive styles of sales. So there's an approach to sales which is very commonly taught, and it's taught because it works. It is effective. I'm not knocking its effectiveness. And I call it the buy now or F off approach to sales, which is basically, if the person isn't ready to buy now, you say to them, well, if you're not in a position to sign up and pay right now, you're clearly not a decisive person. You're clearly not an action taker. I don't want to work with you. The offer's taken off the table. Or you in other ways bully or shame the person. You use a bit of information they've just shared to sort of shame them into feeling that they need to say yes. Any of that stuff. What happens is if the person doesn't say yes as a result of that process, they ain't never coming anywhere near you again. And they are certainly not sending their friends or their respected peers and colleagues. Whereas if you can be respectful, and sometimes, with the best will in the world and the best sales ability in the world, sometimes you will have a client and without a doubt they should be working with you, and they decide to say no. And at the end of the day, we can't take away the right for a grown-up adult human being to make their own decisions, even if we don't agree with them. And even if we don't agree with them, we've made our case, We've made it clear why we think they should, but we ultimately respect their ability to make their own choice. That person will have had a good experience. They'll refer people, and sometimes it's that person who says no to you. They bring you more business through referrals than you would have ever had if they just worked with you themselves. So it can, it helps to grow your business when you have these more respectful style of sales conversations rather than the burning your bridges ones.
One of the things we see certainly as patterns is that your existing clients and, in, I guess, the language that is traditionally used is the ability to upsell or update or have them do more business with you is a big source of income in many people's cases, right? And it's certainly also a source of friction because you're uncomfortable. You're like, oh, no, this is the sacrosanct sort of client relationship, and upselling is awkward in there. But again, it goes back to that value. So talk to us a little bit about how this thinking applies there.
I think it's the same thing. You come back to this place of, I'm in service. How can I best help somebody? And so if you have an upsell because your business mentor said you've got to have an upsell and you've stuck a few extra zeros in it, and now you're trying to sell it because it serves you in your bank balance, that's not going to feel in integrity. But if you've actually designed an upsell because it's absolutely in service to your clients to be offering them this next level way of working with you, or this ongoing support, or this more intimate service, and you know that some of them will really value that if you make it available, then that isn't really, I'd still call it an upsell because that's a technical term, but you're then coming at it from this energy of, hey, I've got this other level and I really think that this would be valuable to you. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah, I like that sort of flipping the script on taking it out of what it does for your bank balance into what this does for the customer. That's really cool. I like that, Catherine.
Yeah, a truly heart-centered business will be good for the client and good for your bank balance at the same time. And if you have a business that's good for your bank balance, but it's not good for the potential client, then that's not a business, that's not a values-led business. And I'm all about values-led and heart-centered business. And I just don't belong in the world that is about serve my bank balance and don't care about what people get. It's just not part of where I operate.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 4 a.m. report. We talk about it a lot. We've spoken to experts before, so I'm glad we're talking about it again. We're going to talk about sales. And we have an author of a best-selling book, Everybody Works in Sales, here to give us the pep talk we all need right now.
We really do. So today we've invited Niraj Kapur. So welcome to the show, Niraj.
Susan and Will, greetings in Canada, sending you best wishes from Ireland. It's like I'm there with you, but we're like thousands of miles apart.
Yeah, it's awesome. We keep saying every so often we'll do a road show, and hop across somewhere else and chat with people. This is awesome. This is one good thing about the pandemic, which is that being able to do this. You were always able to do this virtually, but people are so much more open to it now, and that's cool. Here's some things that I want to chat with you about, Niraj. People keep going back to, I don't like sales. Or one of the myths that tends to go around with founders is that you're going to find this one perfect sales guy or sales team or whatever that's going to make up for your lack of ability in selling. So first, let's sort of break down some of the myths around it. Why does everyone think they suck so much at sales, do you think?
People don't like sales because of bad experiences they've had. And the bad experiences usually involved somebody has cold called them out of the blue, maybe from a call center, or maybe somebody trying to sell PPI or something illegal, and they think, oh, salespeople are awful. And they put them all in the same category. Or they've gone to buy a car and they've dealt with a really sleazy car salesperson, which again, I've had to deal with as well. And so they put them all in the same category. Or they maybe try to pick up the phone once and try to sell to somebody, and the person may have lost their temper at them or hung up on them. And they think, you know what? Sales is the worst job in the world just because I've had a few bad experiences. And I understand that, of course, but that's just such a tiny part of sales. And I keep saying to people, sales is about relationships. Okay? That's what it is. And sales is not about closing a deal. It's such a small part of it. And sales is not about cold calling people 50 or 60 times a day. It's not. Sales is about helping people get results. It's about helping your customers win. It's about developing relationships for a customer. And if you do that properly, then you win. And that's a very different attitude I have compared to most people in sales who just want to try and get the deal. If you just try and get a deal, it's not going to be very good. If you put the other person first and you try and serve them, help them discover their needs, all of a sudden, sales is a brilliant profession. And it's actually something I genuinely enjoy because that's how I work.
It sounds like a lot of the work you might be doing is helping people with their mindset as well, right? That must be a big hurdle to overcome when you're trying to help people become a better person at sales.
It's absolutely huge, Will, much more important than people realize. So when people call me, majority of people call me to say, I want to make more sales, or can you help my team make more sales? And we have the discussion, but throughout the discussion, there's always issues of lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, and all these things relate often to mindset. Quite often when I get to know people, they're going through tough times. Everybody has their own internal battles they're facing. And if you're going through tough times, whether it's relationship problems, family problems, being a parent problems, health problems, that's going to affect your mindset in such a big way. You have to protect yourself. And that's why one of the first things I do with every client isn't teaching them how to sell. It's creating a vision board. It's working on your goals, working on deadlines to your goals, but also working out why do you want those goals. It's not good enough to say, I want to make £100,000 a year. That's fine, but why? What's the reason why? And when you start digging deep, because sales is about asking great questions. And the more questions you ask, the more you really understand what makes people tick. Because at the beginning, you just get the surface answers. But when you understand and you listen, you ask deeper questions, then you often find out the real reason why people are doing something. And that's where sales begins. It's not at the beginning. It's quite often halfway through these things happen. So I work on mindset first and foremost, because if your mindset's not right, it doesn't matter what I teach you.
Yeah, I think you're so right. So often, when we're thinking about the sales process, we tend to work with like a lot of service-based businesses, and for them, there's an element of what shall we call it? It's potentially like a high ticket, sort of high value thing that they're selling. And one of the pieces of friction that might come up is the question of how much, right? And when you're putting together some type of proposal and you're telling someone how much it is, some of the potential things that we hear often is like people received a set of slides and then they ghosted you, like someone who seemed super interested in talking to you last week suddenly not responding to you, and then you follow up and and that doesn't go so well. So I'd love to hear some thoughts from you around that as a problem and how you might suggest they look at it if that's an issue.
That's a big part of the sales process. And what you often find is, Susan, people rush to the price, they give the price and they get rejected. And then they're kind of stuck. So never rush to the price. You got to ask the right questions first. And you shouldn't be asking questions like, who do you compete with? That's what Google is for. You should know that yourself before you call a customer. Really, you should. You want to be asking things like, so where do you see your industry going in 6 months? So the biggest challenges you've had since lockdown, what have they been? You really want to dig deep and find out what they are and what deadlines are your clients working to. These are important questions to ask. Tell me the biggest problem facing your industry right now. Okay. And how can I help you overcome it? This is what you want to do. Get a conversation going. Then once they have told you their problems, you've got to recap their problems. So just to make it clear, you're concerned about this, and this. Is that correct? Okay, good. Is there anything else I've missed? Again, you're just double checking. Okay, so here are my solutions. And then you give 2 or 3 of the solutions you offer that help deal with your client's problem. And then you ask the client, how do you feel about that? And then you just be quiet. Just be quiet for at least 5 seconds. Let the person you're speaking to process what you've told them. And let them come back to you with an answer. Say, fantastic. So just to remind you, here's the problem you had. Here's my solution. And here's the investment. And again, you become quiet. So it's really important when people have gone through that process, you got to recap their problem again, tell them your solution, remind them of the deadline, and then tell them, here's a price. And you got to be quiet for at least 5 seconds. And the second question you asked was about getting ghosted. Now, that does happen from time to time. And the worst thing you can do, which I see a lot of business owners do and entrepreneurs do, is, oh, I hate this client. They're so awful. The client is this, the client is that. And they start blaming everything on the client. Now, there's so many reasons why a client can ghost you. First of all, if you're a business owner, you're doing 100 things in a day. Your business proposal is not necessarily top of their priority list. It's very important to understand that. Second of all, they may have their own personal issues they have to deal with. Thirdly, maybe they didn't like your proposal. Maybe you didn't really get to the heart of their needs. Maybe you sound just like every other salesperson in the world to them. There's a number of reasons why people say no. Maybe they haven't got the budget. Sometimes people don't have the budget, but they don't have the courage to say, look, I can't afford it. And a lot of people find it very difficult saying no to you. So they keep saying, yeah, call me next week, call me next week. And, these things happen. So what do you do? Well, there's a number of things you do. First of all, what you don't do is repeatedly email that person saying, have you read my proposal? What are your thoughts? Have you read my proposal? And this happens. I actually have companies that have asked me to come to their events. And for 3 weeks in a row, I've received the exact same email. Hi, we can't get hold of you right now. Would you like to come to our event? That is the email. That means nothing to me. I can't even remember what the event was about, So when you follow up with people, first of all, you got to remind them about their challenges. You got to remind them about your solutions you offer. That's because people have probably forgotten half of what you talked about. Second thing is you got to think of different ways of communicating with people. So if an email is not working, you want to try video. I'm using video a lot at the moment. It's working very well for me. I shoot a video on my phone and I send it to them through LinkedIn Messenger. It works brilliantly. Now, if you're a bit introvert, then you record a LinkedIn voice note. So you go to the person's profile, click message. You can only do this in mobile, by the way, not desktop. Hold down the microphone icon and leave a message. It's exactly the same as voicemail, but for some reason, LinkedIn voicemail does 3 times better than normal voicemail. And whenever the world opens up again, you can write letters to them. I used to write letters all the time. And I got really frustrated when people started homeworking because I couldn't write letters to them anymore. Because writing letters is so powerful. Because nobody gets letters in the post. What do we get in the post? Bills and junk. So writing a letter in the post is quite nice. So these are just various ways of communicating with people. Voice notes, video, and of course, recapping their needs. Not just ever saying, what were your thoughts?
That's awesome. Right there, that's some great stuff that everybody should be listening to and using. I wanted to ask you, how has people's approach to sales changed then since we've been in lockdown, or how should it be changing? Everybody's got new heightened sensitivities, the burnout, all of that stuff. Should people be tweaking their usual way of doing sales, or are there things they should be avoiding? Tell me what you're noticing and the advice you're giving around that.
Great question. The advice I give around that is very simple. Normally, I would call a lot of people first thing in the morning. I don't do that anymore because people are on team meetings first thing in the morning, whether it's Google Hangouts or Microsoft, whatever, or Zoom meetings. And they're often on webinars, they're often speaking to clients. And by lunchtime, people are just a bit tired of looking at their computer and they're a bit tired of Zoom. And then at lunchtime, what do people do? They get on their phones, they look at LinkedIn, they look at Facebook, they look at Tinder, whatever it is they do. And they're staring at their phones. And I find by 2:00, most people are just worn out. And that's when I pick up the phone. 2:00 to 3:00 every day, I'm on that phone, I'm calling people. It's so important because people actually don't mind as much as you think being called by then. Now, I say between 2:00 and 3:00 because a lot of my clients are, especially female. Most of my clients are women, which surprises people. A lot of them have kids. So at 3:00, they go pick up the kids from school. A lot of them. So I only call between 2 and 3. I rarely call anybody between 3:00 and 4:30 because they're on the way to pick up the kids from school, on the way back to pick up the kids from school, spending time with the children. It's just not a good time to call. But I find between sort of 5:00 to 6:00 now is very good. And the evenings are fantastic for email and LinkedIn because a lot of people are catching up in the evenings. So the way people have worked has changed quite a bit. People are taking longer breaks in the afternoons, and many of them are catching up in the evenings, especially entrepreneurs and business owners.
That's awesome. I like the way you described that, Dave. That resonates. I never actually thought of that about that, but we are taking longer breaks in the afternoon. And then I am that person after dinner. I'm circling back, checking my emails, going on LinkedIn, making some comments. That really resonates with me. Interesting. Yeah.
I think the points that you made around being on LinkedIn and things like that, at times when people are probably spending their time there and really getting to know what those patterns are, that does really resonate with me. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Will. Take care, Susan.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're losing sleep over a marketing-related problem, let us know. Drop us a line at cp.digital. Sweet dreams. Well, hopefully.